Welcome to Future Forward 2022. Today is October 4th. This is a virtual conference, and our kickoff session is Cybersecurity in a Zero Trust Environment. My name is Gary Dehart, and I'm joined by Wes Stillman and Andrew Wall. They'll give us their bio in just a minute. And again, like I said, my name is Gary Dehart. I'm the publisher and managing partner of Insightful Accountant and the host of the Accounting Insiders podcast, which I need to have you two on separately to kind of dive a little bit deeper, maybe into some specific topics around cybersecurity in the accounting profession, maybe at a later date. Learning objectives. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to be identifying the latest cyber threats impacting bookkeeping, accounting, and tax professionals. We're going to learn how to use key technologies and strategies to protect your clients and your firm from these threats, and discover the latest IRS rules and announcements related to cyber scams and regulatory compliance. Say that 5 times fast. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get rolling. CPE is available for this session. So you must be in the session for 50 minutes, 50 minutes. You must answer 3 poll questions. This is just like every other CPE thing you've ever sat through. 50 minutes. 3 poll questions. If you don't do that, don't email me asking me where your form is because you didn't qualify. But if you do meet that minimum criteria, you will receive an email with a link to a short survey. It's 3 questions. They're like, did you like the presentation? Did you like the topic? What'd you think about Andrew? Did you like his tie, but he's not wearing a tie? So just 3 really short questions. Complete that survey. We'll send you the certificate immediately. This is being recorded, and it will be posted to our YouTube channel. The link is there, and I will also put the link into the chat box as we get rolling here. Slide deck also will be put into the chat as we get this thing rolling. Both of those will be sent to you as follow-up. And if you do have any questions, put those into the Q&A box. We'll do our best to get to them either during the session or we'll try to answer them at the end, but we have got a lot of content. So we may not be able to get to the individual topics, but we have a lot of different topics that we're covering in the session. So hopefully we'll get to your answers even before you ask them. So Wes, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll roll over to Andrew.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Currently, I am the CTO, CIO for Swissnet and associated companies as well. I started Right Size Solutions back in 2022. Focused mainly on IT as a service and cybersecurity in the wealth management and accounting spaces, and merged with Swissnet in 2020. So here we are, and loving every second of it. So it's been a great ride.
So is advisory still a name that's out there and is used?
It is.
Okay.
So Visory is the overarching company that has all of our companies merged together. So there's about 4 companies now that all focused on wealth management and accounting space financial services. So we're very fortunate to have a great board and growing dramatically. So focus strictly on that space and how we can help with not only IT, but building that cybersecurity model into it as well. So,
okay, fantastic. How about it, Andrew?
So I'm the managing partner of CPA for IT. We're an accounting firm up here in the Great White North, specializing in IT consultants. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Friday Night Live with Accountants, which is exactly that. It's Friday nights, it's live, and it's with accountants, where we just geek out on all sorts of technology stuff and fun new things for the accounting world. I started actually my career not actually as an accountant, but actually as an IT developer. And I think the specific experience that I have that's relevant for today's session is I'm one of the few accounting firms that's been through a cyber attack and is openly talking about it. I think there's a lot more people who are out there who have been through them. At least the stats certainly tell us there are. But not enough people are willing to open the kimono and share what their experience was like. And so hopefully I can share that with you guys so you guys can learn from my experiences.
So first question here is, what is your biggest fear related to cybersecurity?
Oh, do we get to answer 2?
oh, cool.
Data hacking of core technologies, remote employee device usage, phishing or malware. I love phishing, but not that kind of phishing. Let's just give about 10 more seconds here. And again, if you want CPE, you need to participate.
Very curious to see what the answer is here.
Data hacking of core tech is the leader right now. So we're going to close this out in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you. And then just so everybody can see the results if you weren't able to see them real clearly. But so 48% of data hacking of core technologies, malware was number 2 at 24%, phishing at 17%, and remote employee device usage at 11%. So there's no shortage of concerns, right? So we were kind of in the green room before we got rolling. We did talk about the IRS. You guys help me out. It's the
Publication
Yes.
4557, I believe it's called.
And it's called, the name of it is it's the security, the WISP. I totally drawn a blank on
Written information security policy.
Thank you very much. That's why you guys are the experts and I'm just the moderator. And so, Wes, real quickly, tell us what that is and why it's important. Then Andrew, you can address why it's important to this space.
Yeah, so it's a policy that you're writing that says this is how we address risk to our company from a policy standpoint and with respect to security. Today, it's kind of generally around cybersecurity concerns itself. So it's a set of policies or a policy where you've written down, this is how we're addressing it, how we're protecting ourselves going forward. Andrew, obviously there's great importance around this. So let me let you jump in here as well.
Well, I mean, I guess, first of all, it's the law. And I think a lot of people may not realize that they are governed by this, right? And so this 4557 document that I was referring to is the Safeguarding Taxpayer Data, which is a great document for understanding what are your obligations. And I think we were talking earlier, like everyone knows this, right? I'm like, I'm actually not sure that actually everybody is aware of the FTC rules. But there's the GLB Act, and which gives the FTC the ability to audit and make sure that you're actually implying and abiding by these rules. And a lot of people think, well, this is specific to financial institutions, and I'm not a financial institution, but they're actually defining a financial institution as a tax preparer. So if you're a tax preparer, you've got to abide by these rules, which means you need to make sure that you have a safeguarding plan for your business. So the safeguards rule does apply to this industry. Hopefully people are aware of this, and you know, complying with it because you're obligated to is one thing, but also complying with it so that you're actually protecting your practice is a whole nother thing. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, when you do go through a cyber attack, the fear, the emotions that come up, and the costs associated with it can be overwhelming. And so making sure that you're prepared and preemptive is really important, because an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right?
Yeah, I would add, Andrew, it's not, it is IRS, it is DOJ, it is SEC, but so at a federal level, there's, you know, alphabet soup that gets involved in this, but there is also state regulations, right, that apply to all businesses, not just financial service organizations. So really trying to understand what the regulations are today to run a business is difficult, but it's one of the things that come with being in business and trying to understand what really needs to be done. I will tell you what we're going to go through today and talk about will really kind of help to address that big umbrella of things. So if you're able to understand where some of this is happening and address it in your company, you're going to have a really good start, right, at at covering all those different regulations and entities at the same time.
And I think one of the most important things we all agreed on is that this doesn't have to be scary and overwhelming.
Right.
I know it can sound, when we start quoting the alphabet soup here, it can become intimidating, but it can be approachable.
And it's bookkeepers, accountants, tax professional. Basically, if you're touching that data, this covers you. But what if I only have, it's just me? I'm a sole practitioner.
Still applicable.
Still applicable.
Yeah.
100 employees, it's applicable. If you're a bookkeeping practice, it's applicable. And I think, the point is, if you have interest in this topic, it's applicable, right? If you read Insightful Accountant, it's applicable. If you're in our market, it's applicable. And like we said before, it's not a problem until it's a problem. And then it can be a very big problem for you. So I did put a link to the Security Summit, which is one of the IRS groups. They built a template for you to take a look at. Wes brought up a good point of, hey, don't just go in and add your name into the template. It has to be a valid document for your business, for your practice, but it's a great guide. Then Andrew, if you wouldn't mind putting that link to that IRS pub, that would be great. Put that in the chat too.
Yeah, I'll drop that in there.
So let's roll on. Did you have something else, Wes?
I just wanted to add that publication that he's going to put a link in. It's a little long, but if you go down to the bottom, there's a 2 or 3 page checklist there that Andrew mentioned before that is very helpful, that I think is worth taking a look at the very least.
And I think one of the other things too is that they actually state that the security plan must be appropriate for the company's size and complexity. And again, to your point, Wes, that means that what would be appropriate for a small company would be very different from what would be appropriate for a large company. So building that customized plan for your firm is absolutely critical.
Right, exactly.
All right, let's hit this first discussion topic. So what are the most significant current cybersecurity threats to accountants right now? And when we say accountants, we're talking about bookkeepers, accountants, tax professionals, people in our world.
Yeah. I'd say BEC,
go ahead,
what do you
Andrew.
think? I'm going to go with BEC right now. Business email compromise would be, I think, number one, at least from the stats that I'm seeing. That's the highest vulnerability. It's actually, from what I was reading, it's like 50 times more damaging than ransomware. Ransomware is certainly getting all the publicity, and I'm not really sure why people aren't talking about business email compromise. But email is number one, and to me, close second to that would be ransomware, and then phishing. I don't know if that's consistent with your data, Wes, but that's the information I'm finding.
Yeah, actually, those two things go hand in hand. I thought it was really interesting, the polling and how many people kind of looked at the hacking aspect of it. It's more likely that you're going to get a phishing email or a business compromise. There's this thing called account takeover, which really, Andrew, is what you're talking about with the business email compromise, where an attacker actually poses as a real customer or an employee and actually has access to that real account. And so that's really the number one threat, because from there, they're able to communicate not only within your firm, but with your clients, and actually pose as a real client to you. And it's very difficult to know that's what's come in. I think there's a couple of other things that I want to mention there. Andrew, I think you're right. Phishing, email, account takeover, that's really number one that we see. I think that the second most common error is, I'll call it setup errors. So whether you're using Microsoft Azure, whether you're trying to protect things on an individual machine or any, AWS, it's pretty interesting. One of the number one issues with AWS is that those environments, like setting up your storage in Amazon, is not set up correctly to protect the environment. So either it's a lack of knowledge or experience or whatever, but it's that setup that isn't being done correctly. This idea of token access probably is the third category I would put in there. And what that really means is when we authenticate today, whether it's through multi-factor authentication or single sign-on, or when you sign into your Microsoft account, it's using what's known as modern authentication, which uses this idea of electronic tokens to authenticate things back and forth, right? So that you don't have to sign on every single time you've got an authenticated token. Stealing those tokens, and this is where I think the polling may have gotten some of it right. Once inside your computer, it's fairly easy to steal those tokens and then advance to being able to take over accounts. So that's, all these things are kind of tied together. Invoice fraud, guys, watch out for that, especially in our industry. That's when, like Andrew, you mentioned the business email compromise. A lot of those invoices that are coming through, they look very real. They might actually be from actual vendors or whatever. Make sure you know that you're expecting those invoices when they come across, right? Because clicking on them can be deadly.
Well, I think the title of this session is Zero Trust, right? And you really can't trust inbound communication anymore, right? If you're receiving anything, you need to be doing outbound communication to verify that it's valid in this day and age.
Yeah, continuous verification. By the way, that's interesting. Gary, we didn't ask the question, but zero trust, just for an easy definition for everybody, think of continuously trying to validate not only your configuration, but who you are and who you're communicating with. It's an easy way to think about zero trust, just continually trying to verify it.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, can't recall if we get to this later in the presentation, but being a small business ourselves, it's just the thought process of ensuring that we are secure is overwhelming, and
Very much so.
trying to understand how to do that. I'm not sure if we get into this or if maybe that's another topic, another discussion. Let's roll on to the next question here. There we go. So why have ransomware, account takeovers, all these compromises continue to pose such a problem? Maybe I just answered it right with the last thing I said. What do we? I mean, what is it? What's the other than the opportunity? Right? It's big business. Why is it so difficult for our profession to get our heads around this?
Andrew, I know from a technology perspective, but I'd love to get that real life experience from you as well in this discussion.
I think it's, first of all, because those people who are being compromised aren't talking about it and sharing their experiences. Like it's very rare when you go and search the internet to be able to find people who have publicly shared their information. And I know also because our lawyers basically told me not to. And I said, no, this is important. Our community needs to know and understand what's going on here. Help me figure out how I can share this information in a way that is, I'm not providing any information I shouldn't. But first of all, we're told not to, so we don't share the information so people don't know and understand the depth and breadth of the exposure within the industry. And I think that there's also a lot of misunderstanding around where some of the vulnerabilities are, right? People think that they're adequately protected because they're using, their bank has multi-factor authentication. QuickBooks has multi-factor authentication. I'm secure, right? So they're assuming that everything is safe based on the fact that they've outsourced a lot of the risk to third-party providers is part of it. And I think the other thing is, like we talk about, when we did our first polling question, people said, hey, I'm worried about a hack, not recognizing that the largest source of intrusion ultimately comes from human behavior, not from sophisticated hacks. And these phishing attacks and poor password hygiene are far more vulnerable. And again, without getting into too much of the detail, it wasn't a sophisticated hack that got into us. It was more this human error type of intrusion issues that you have to worry about. And so I think, education is absolutely imperative. We need to spread more of that. And also we need to make sure that people aren't afraid of this, because sometimes it becomes a topic that is overwhelming. Because as much as I've learned about technology and security, I know nothing compared to Wes. So when I go, and sometimes it can be overwhelming even to myself. And so knowing when to bring in the experts and how to approach this from a small business perspective without having to become a security expert is a really important step that a lot of people haven't been able to overcome yet.
I absolutely agree. You said something there that near and dear to my heart. I do come across, Andrew, a lot of clients and prospects and just people in general that I talk to that feel like they've outsourced that responsibility. And to a certain degree, you have, right? If you go to Swissnet or you go to Intuit, QBO, whatever, there's been tremendous investment in protecting that information and cybersecurity. And I know we spend roughly a couple $1 million a year just in technology and training and, you know, monitoring and all of those things. The bottom line is, though, that you've kind of created a vulnerable point, right? So if you kind of think about all the places you go now on the cloud that are protected, what is the one single factor? That's your access, your computer, that single point of failure. And that's the point where most folks are attacking for sure. And that kind of goes back to why things like phishing and, you know, the account takeover, business email compromises that Andrew mentioned are key in that activity, right? I think from a technical perspective, there are ways to know and understand what is happening in these takeovers. So ransomware, when you click on something, it doesn't just happen, right? There is a clear set of activities and behaviors that start occurring inside the computer, both automated from the bad actors as well as manual. And so there are red flags and there is activity and behavior that pop up. The problem is for the normal humans in the world, right? Without having the right defensive technology in place and the right technology team in place, those red flags are really hard to see, right? You just don't, I mean, you're running your business, you're doing things on a daily basis that support your clients. Those red flags typically are not seen, right? So you have to have the right technology and the right team. And what that means is we don't know as accountants, as financial advisors, we don't know and understand what we don't know and understand, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so I don't think it's out of a lack of respect or, you know, understanding that this is dangerous out there. This is more a matter of maybe not being aware of what the real capabilities are of these bad actors, and it's extensive, right?
Yeah.
So that coupled with the idea of cost, right, to be able to find these red flags and deal with them, and the convenience factor, right? I can't tell you how many clients have said, you know, I don't want that timeout and I don't want multi-factor. I just want to do it once a day. Okay, right? But that opens up holes in the environment. So, but absolutely valuable to the client, right? If you're spending too much of your time trying to protect things, you can't run your business. So that's why I think, Andrew, what you said earlier is very important. That written information security policy needs to be tailored to your business and what your risks are and how you perceive those risks.
Yeah.
And then train around it, which is one of the other things Andrew said, training, right? It's that awareness and the training of threat. As you were talking, Wes, I'm sitting there thinking I mean, working with a company like yours or others or what have you, but, you know, outsourcing that technology side of it, it's like your dental floss, right? I mean, it's
right. I like that.
daily. I know I'm supposed to floss, just like I'm supposed to change my passwords, but do I really do it every day? Maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah, monitoring and making sure that, because I can tell you again from our firsthand experience, when we had our password policies and stuff like that, we found out that a lot of our policies weren't actually being followed because we weren't actually doing the monitoring to make sure of it. And again, now there's the tools that can give you the ability to be able to monitor across this organization. If you're using the right password management tools, you can monitor your password hygiene. And that's a really important step that I think often can be overlooked. And Wes, to your point about not recognizing these intrusions, I was looking at a 2020 IBM study, and it says it takes on average 280 days to detect an intrusion.
Yeah.
Because it's not like when you go through a breach, they're announcing it to you. Hey, we're in. We just got into your system. They're in there collecting data, and I know again, one of the misconceptions that people have is like, oh well, I have a backup. I can just restore from my backup, and I'm fine. Well, no, there's costs associated with reporting. There's costs associated with providing your clients access to monitoring tools. There are other costs other than business continuity that people have to be aware of.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up. I was just reading an article, and I'm trying to remember where the school district was. Might have been in, I want to say Texas, but I could be wrong. They were hacked, significant hack, and the ransom was so outrageous, didn't fit, right? So they just said, forget it. We're not going to do it. And the bad actors did publish, right? That's what makes ransomware work for everybody, right? It's the threat of that information being leaked and held out. But at some point, you just can't pay millions and millions of dollars to protect that information. So, especially when it comes down to taxpayer money. So it is interesting, right? The risk and the analysis of that risk. What is the information and how big a risk is it to my clients, for example? I will tell you, it is interesting that we'll hit this this industry. My wife and I were trying to change beneficiaries at Schwab this weekend. And true story, Barb's working away and she's struggling, right? Trying to get this thing changed. And so she gets on the horn with Schwab. Long story short, Schwab says, by the way, you aren't going to have to worry anymore. We're doing away with passwords. So if anyone's wondering where this is going, Schwab goes, you're not going to log in. We're going to do voice recognition. We're going to do face recognition. We're going to change completely the paradigm. So I want everyone on this call to start thinking about that, because I know many of you may have access to your clients' accounts in various ways, right? Start thinking about what that means to the business. It won't happen overnight, but that technology is coming.
Biometrics are interesting to me. Sorry to go on a bit of an aside, because we see that as more and more of an emerging way of authenticating for multi-factor authentication. But I find it so interesting. I mean, you see, like I've had my kids come up to me and take my phone, like while I'm sleeping, and put my phone to my face to get access to my phone. All right, I have a software that I use for video editing called Descript, which allows me to create text using my own voice that's just written from text. So, I mean, it's interesting that it's a new form of authentication. Are criminals going to find a way to hack that as well?
Absolutely, they will. I mean, it's like anything else, right? I mean, criminals are stealing catalytic converters, right, for the materials in them. Okay, so we're going to go to electric cars. Do we really think they're going to not figure out how to steal something off that? I mean, it's there. But the point being, everything that we try to do, right, there's going to be some way around it somewhere. So being able to understand, red flags of the time and behavior, what's common and normal in your business versus what is not, is really, really where I think the future of defenses are going and where they are today. And the use of artificial intelligence is tremendously helpful. So, but it's not cheap either. So
No, but I guess it's really about just having a layered defense strategy, right?
yes,
So if they get through one wall, you've got multiple layers of protection.
exactly.
So that, Wes, let me ask you this question. That is, so you guys talked about before about, okay, well, perception is QBO's got my back covered, or, or whatever the software solution is. So what should we be looking for in the certifications or like it's here, the contract provisions? Because I imagine that if you really read the 82-page contract for QBO, that it says Intuit's not responsible for anything data loss or anything like that, right? They're going to go,
That's
hey,
true.
not my problem, right?
That is absolutely true.
And not picking on Intuit, I'm sure it's like that for everybody, and everybody has a Google account, right? Guess what? So does the rest of the world. So what do I look for then? I mean, if they don't really have my back, I mean, and their SOC 2 certification or whatever the latest one is, how am I safe?
You're not.
Right.
That's the reality.
Short answer. There we go.
And I don't mean to be flippant. It's a serious discussion, right? You want to do your vendor due diligence, and don't just use it as a checkbox. Try to understand what your vendor really is doing to protect you. They're not going to guarantee that protection 100%. They can't, just like you can't guarantee, something to your client, right? I guarantee I'm going to make you $100 million. It's not going to happen, right? But that said, I think there's a couple of key things. Have you looked at their risk assessment, right? Your vendor's risk assessment. Do they have a SOC 2, right? Type 2 around security? And if so, have you looked at that report and understand what your responsibilities are to help make your vendor's policies and technology and security work best for you? So it's a true partnership that you're entering into. It's not I've just abdicated everything to a vendor. There's participation and understanding that. I think we do a lot of, I think we do it twice a year now, tabletop exercises. What if scenarios? What if this hack happened to us? What would we do? Working with your vendors through that scenario, I think would be extremely helpful, right? Adding that in so that at least you can understand what that meant. I think I'll turn this over to Andrew and let you comment here, but I wanted to make a comment that if I'm a consumer of even our products like SwissNet or Pfizery or QuickBooks or anybody else, the question really becomes, how do I feel about how they're answering my questions, right? Do they really know what they're talking about? Do I have a valid partner in this that really understands my business and the risk posed to my business, as well as the just general cyber? If you feel like you're not getting a good explanation, that might be a red flag for you, right?
Yeah.
And what say you?
My take on it is, I mean, really the only way to protect against this is, like I said, that multi-layered approach. And so this is where your cybersecurity insurance comes into play, right? And that's an important backup to me, that for the things I cannot control, that I have some protection against those, is sort of the way I'm looking at that multi-level, multi-layered approach, because it can be overwhelming and intimidating to even understand to a lot of people what is SOC 2 compliant, like what are the things to be looking for. And absolutely, I mean, read through their privacy policies, read through their, and have an understanding, at least at a layman's perspective. But look at making sure that you've got multiple layers of protection within your organization, that you're working with a security professional that you know and trust, who can tell you, okay, this is, a safe and vetted customer. I'm confident with the way that you're using this product within your business, that it's not exposing you to any unnecessary risk, and that you've got, cyber security insurance to protect against those unknown risks. And then I guess the the number one piece of information I would say is avoid free software. If it's free, it's probably free for a reason. There is something to be said about going to the industry leaders and giants. It doesn't guarantee you anything. And as you pointed out, people are probably aware that a lot of the major backbones that we're using do effectively push that risk down to you. And so believing that just because you're using a third-party tool, that is the protection that you need is not actually consistent with the reality. You have to understand that the buck rests with you, and it's up to you to make sure that your firm is doing everything that they can. And that's ultimately what they're looking for is there's no specific requirements. You must do X and you must do Y, because they recognize that X and Y are going to change by tomorrow as to what X and Y should be. It's, are you taking security seriously? Are you taking a reasonable approach in this day and age to protect your data? And understanding what data is absolutely critical to protect. Like, what is personal identifiable data? What is the information that if hackers get access to is dangerous and valuable to them? Knowing and understanding that, well, in this day and age where data storage is cheap, it doesn't mean you should keep every piece of data forever, and that because it's easy to give access to everyone in your organization, you should. So this is one of the most important things that we learned in going through our own vulnerabilities, was we had always had the approach that, hey, it's super cheap to store. Like, we're going to keep everything forever. And learn the hard way that that's not a good approach to take, because you literally are going to pay for every piece of data that is potentially exposed in one way or another. So limiting how long you store data for is such an important component, and limiting who has access to what data are steps that you can again take to put in those layers of protection. And again, another analogy I often like to use is a good old Canadian one, which is you don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun the guy beside you, right? So
Andrew, I would add, I like your comment about trying to determine how long to keep data. So there's a short story, a very popular CRM was hacked, and they proactively looked at their client data to send information saying, hey, we're going to give you credit monitoring and what have you. And as it turns out, because many of the people that were using the CRM never deleted clients that left them, ended up getting that notification that it had been hacked. And they're going, wait a minute, I didn't work with that firm for the last 2 years. Why was my information still there? That caused more of an issue than the actual hack itself.
Wow.
So there is good reason to understand how long to keep it. I would caution, you need to understand what your regulations are around your industry, your specific business, and if there are any regulations as to how long you need to keep that information before you purge it.
Let me just keep us rolling here. We got to make sure we got our poll questions in. I'm going to throw up the second poll, and that is, do you have any concerns about state regulations? And I think Wes, when we had just the opening dialogue there, I think you mentioned state specifically. One of you did, because I don't know that. Again, goes to awareness. Are people really aware? You've got a federal level, you've got state, maybe local. I don't know about local, but and I would say accounting profession is certainly one that would be a right target, because you've got a lot of really, really important data. So concerns about state. So 45% have said yes, 18% have said no, 36% so far have said not sure. We're gonna go ahead and close this up. So if you need that CPE, make sure you have answered. Give you 3 more seconds and we'll wrap it up. Do you guys have any comments on that one way or the other?
Being Canadian, again, it gives me a bit of a biased perspective. But I think one of the things, again, this came to my own naivety when it came to understanding what my obligations were. Thankfully, my very first step was to reach out and contact a lawyer who specialized in cybercrime, who helped me understand what my obligations were. And unfortunately, I didn't even realize prior to this that I had these obligations. And this is again why I feel it's so important that we reach out and we educate. And thank you to Insightful for putting on this conference and talking about this really critical topic. And I think what's absolutely important is people need to do a little bit of due diligence. And yes, there are some costs associated with it. But you don't have any qualms about paying for your Intuit licenses. Why do you have qualms about paying for a lawyer to understand what your obligations are when it comes to cybersecurity? It's an investment that you need to make in your business, from my perspective. So to me, the key to cyber protection is building your team. Just like we talk to our clients of building your team of financial professionals, whether that includes financial advisors, accountants, lawyers, and insurance professionals. We got to build our team of professional advisors who are going to help protect us from cybercrime. It doesn't mean that we have to become experts. We need to hire organizations like Swissnet, and we need to hire lawyers, and we need to get cybersecurity insurance. So we're building that protection that our organization needs to have. And I know that sometimes if you're a sole practitioner, you might be overwhelmed or fearful of the cost. But it's approachable. I'm telling you that there are solutions out there designed for sole proprietors. So there are ways that you can get the protection that you need. You can get the cybersecurity protection. You can get the software security from a technical standpoint, and you can get the legal help and support in an affordable way that your business can manage.
Great. Gary, real quick, just to note, I'm seeing a lot of comments, questions about the link that we posted. Zoho is not letting folks in, so maybe you can just take the actual document and share it or post a link somewhere else for it.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
I could only post to hosts and panelists. I did try and respond to the Q&A that was in the thing, but maybe Gary, if you could take and repost mine, that would be helpful.
Okay, I will. Well, I'll do that while you guys talk about this next step. We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but I don't think we've given any like step 1, 2, and 3. Maybe there's not, maybe it's like 28 steps, but you guys could kind of kick this around. So what are the most important tools for protecting the firm? We've kind of talked about it generally, but let's say I've got, 3 things, 5 things, whatever the number is. What are my must-haves?
To me, there's 3 major ones. I know, Wes, you can go more thorough. I'm going to go first because I know you're going to say all the things that I say, plus a few more. But password management and password hygiene is absolutely critical, and being able to monitor that. So a password manager with dark web monitoring to me is absolutely critical. Multi-factor authentication tool that you're leveraging is, to me, absolutely critical, because you could have good password hygiene, but if you don't have anything to ensure that the person who is using that password is actually the person you gave the password to, there's a vulnerability. And then, to me, the big thing that I'm really passionate about, and again, one of the big things that saved our bacon, was endpoint discovery and response, which is sort of the next evolution of antivirus. Not going to go too much into the weeds about what that is, but it's an absolute imperative in my mind if you are having an environment with multiple endpoints. And by endpoints, I mean any access point into your network, a printer, a computer, all this IoT crap that we got going on in this day and age.
Boy, those are some great ones. Andrew, can I put you on spot for a minute and ask you, what EDR did you choose? What tool?
CrowdStrike. So we use CrowdStrike.
We're a fan of CrowdStrike as well. So everyone out there, it's not cheap, but it is a very good
It's
product.
priceless. It is worth every penny.
It's a very good product. I would add a couple of key things. One, so thank you for that. I think you hit the highlights for sure. I want to point out to everybody, multi-factor authentication, in my opinion, as a technologist, is a must-have, right? But I want to caution you, it's kind of like leaving your garage door open or closed at night. Without MFA, you might as well leave that garage door open. But keep in mind that MFA is not be all end all. It doesn't take us much to figure out how to get around MFA, quite honestly. So use it. You have to use it. If you don't use it, you're not going to get cybersecurity insurance, which is becoming a must. I would also point out your cybersecurity insurance is a great source of information for you, and they're very happy to help you. So keep that in the back of your mind. The only other thing I'd like to add really is kind of the top 3-4 things that you ought to be doing. You should be doing training on cybersecurity, and there's a couple of really good ones out there, not terribly expensive at all. InfoSec is one, and Know Before is the other one that we really like. And the reason we like—
Is that KNOW?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. KNOW, the letter BE4. Know Before. We really like those, mainly because they track the training that you're doing. Sole proprietor, you go, the heck, I don't care if I mean, I know if I took the test or not. But what's cool about it is you do a little reading, you watch a little video, you learn a little something, you take a little quiz, you test yourself. If it's not right, you go back and you review some things. It's really important. We all think we know a lot about what we're doing, but the reality is this stuff changes on a rare basis. So being able to spot those phishing emails and what have you, really important. So I would add that to the list as well.
Okay. So we're right at 50 minutes. So I want to try to get in a couple more things. I know I've got to get at least one other poll question in, but Andrew, I'm going to hit you with this just because you've gone through it. You may not have gone to ransomware, but so the question is, what do you do if you get hit with the ransomware?
So
you probably want to, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
The very first thing you do is reach out to your counsel. And thankfully that was the very first thing that I did. And they'll give you the steps that you have to go through. So obviously containing the intrusion is absolutely critical. So you're going to reach out to your lawyer. You're also going to need to bring in a security team who's going to do an analysis on how deep the intrusion is to understand what data was actually captured. You're also going to potentially be negotiating with these terrorists, which is what they are. And in fact, I never thought in my entire life I would employ a hostage negotiator, but I have. And I can tell you it was a pretty scary few weeks going through that. It's just it's an experience that is hard to explain to anyone else. And the roller coasters of emotions, I thought my business was finished. I was like, oh, this is, my reputational risk was going to be destroyed. I thought I was going to be potentially vulnerable. I didn't understand, and then finding out, subsequently all the reporting obligations I was going to do. And I had to tell all my clients what had happened and tell them to the extent of what happened and all the information. I was like, oh, they're all going to leave me. Thankfully, that didn't happen. And the fear is far worse than the reality, like in most situations. But you're going to have to talk to your lawyer. You're going to have to talk to a security team who's going to come in and do an analysis. You're going to have to begin reporting to the appropriate governing bodies and knowing who you have to report to, which will likely include the IRS, the state, your clients, and potentially others. But again, that's where your legal counsel is going to come in and help you. And like I said, you're going to have a security team to do some analysis that are going to generate the report that is ultimately going to identify what data was breached and what information has to be reported. Did I miss anything on that, Wes?
No, I mean, you're spot on. I will say, and I'm not sure when you went through it, but it sounds like maybe you did this without cybersecurity insurance. You didn't have cybersecurity insurance?
I did not have cybersecurity insurance, and I thought naively, again, the amount of naivety that I had going into this, I thought my liability insurance protected me from cyber. So what's interesting to me is that as a professional CPA, I am required to have liability insurance to protect my my firm. I'm not required to have cybersecurity insurance. And in fact, up here in Canada, the provider that's given to us by the governing body to provide the insurance doesn't offer cybersecurity. It's not even an option. I was like mind blown.
Yeah.
Like, how is our governing body not requiring that we have this?
Yeah, I really want to get this in because the experience you had to go through is very different if you have cybersecurity insurance.
Yeah.
All those things that he mentioned about bringing in the right forensic team, security team, all the notifications, communications, reporting, your cybersecurity insurance actually does that. They actually bring in, and they also do the negotiations, right? So they
have hostage negotiators on staff. And one thing I discovered again is that you are not legally allowed to pay a ransomware.
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah, it could be against
you have
the law,
to go
right?
through someone who is actually authorized to pay them, because it could be considered, you could be charged with funding terrorism.
And most of the time it's through some kind of Bitcoin transaction, which for most of us is going to be a difficult situation anyway. So the point being, cybersecurity insurance, a lot of people ask me, well, what's the right amount? How much should I be paying? What should I take it out on? I can tell you that it's going to depend on your risk to your business. The way I look at cybersecurity insurance and my consultation is look at your revenue stream, because that's the insurance, that's the protection mechanism you're trying to protect, is the revenue stream, right? You can choose not to pay it. Maybe you go out of business, maybe you don't. But the point is, it's your annual revenue stream that you're trying to protect. So take that for whatever it's worth.
And then, so let me throw up, I'm going to do these last two polls kind of back to back. And while we run these, and if anybody was listening, they might be able to get the answer to this one if they were listening to Andrew earlier. But Wes and Andrew both, if you wouldn't mind, go through that Q&A. I don't want to put it up on my screen just because somebody might tell me I need to spend more time on Zoom to learn how to share my screen better. But if you guys would find a couple of questions that you think are the best for the audience, and maybe we can try to get to those. And then before we wrap up too, I do want to give you both the opportunity, just kind of, any closing comments. And Wes, maybe share a little bit about what Swissnet does and how you guys approach this just as a vendor into this space. All right. So if you need CPE, go ahead and answer these questions. And again, because we're going to close this one out and put another one up, and then we'll turn it over to you two to kind of wrap this up. And so we're going to close this in 3 more seconds. Don't call me if you don't answer them. Close that one out. And the results basically, so they weren't listening. 40% said 228. Then we got 1 week, 32, and 2 hours. So it was that bigger number, right, Andrew?
Yeah, that bigger number. I had 280 days in the stat I found, which was admittedly from 2018. So hopefully we're getting better at detecting these, but not much better apparently.
No.
And then I'm going to throw this one up just in case somebody may have missed one of the other polls. This way they can still get their minimum of 3. And it's basically how long do you keep data? And Andrew, you talked about this too. And then I think Wes had some comments on it. Like, well, just, storage is basically free, right? I mean, it's super cheap. So I'll just keep it forever. Maybe that's not such a good idea in this day and age. And you guys pointed out 2 or 3 really good examples of why it's a terrible idea. But I think our biggest challenge, both as a small business for me, and then for the profession, is the profession is comprised of so many small businesses. Just the thought of taking this task on and dedicating the time, the resources, the effort, because it's not going to be easy, right? To get your firm secure, while it's daunting, it's critical, right? I mean, every day it's more critical. So people keep keep indefinitely. So those of you who said indefinitely, I didn't share it here. Might want to rethink that according to our panelists. So did you guys find a couple of questions in the Q&A that would be good to address real quickly?
I think a lot of the questions they were asking were related to making sure they get those things, which I think the WIS document and the IRS publication, which we put over, and lots of comments about, when humans stop doing the work and machines are in charge, the hacks will stop. Which I mean, I think one of the realities here is that it's ultimately human behavior. And again, like as an accountant, I love finding stats and data. And one of the stats I found is that 95% of intrusions ultimately are based on human behavior, not on these deep hacks that we're used to seeing the movies where these hackers who with their elaborate keyboard skills are hacking into these systems. That's not the reality in most situations. It's a lot more about human behavior and a lot more about social engineering, right? And social engineering is really getting quite sophisticated. And I don't know if you have time to share a story, but there's a really interesting hack, which was a cryptocurrency organization that was hacked. And how they were hacked was a very in-depth social engineering experience where the hackers first put out an advertisement for a job posting for a cryptocurrency developer. And targeting this specific organization. They got the guy to apply for the job. They went through the whole interview process, et cetera, et cetera. And his job offer that they sent to him at his work thing that he ultimately clicked and opened was the malware.
Wow.
Yeah. So like months and months of social engineering to effectively get him to open a link he should never have trusted.
Right. I do want to very quickly, 2 seconds. Brad, you had put a comment in there about keeping their destruction policy as 7 years. I think that's absolutely appropriate. It needs to be business by business. Keep it for as long as you need to keep it for your business. And I really think that's the point. Just doing indefinitely is kind of like not making a decision that gets made for you, right? So I think it's absolutely appropriate. 7 and 5 years are kind of the two regulatory timeframes that pop to my head. But if you have that policy, please don't just change it because you think it's too long. There's good reason to have that policy in place. So kudos, Brad, that you've got that policy out there to begin with.
And so we are right at 1 hour. Wes, just real quickly, Swissnet, what do you guys do and how do you help solve this problem?
We do it multiple ways. One, private hosting, completely secure and everything from CrowdStrike and monitoring and everything else on all of our servers. From an in-device standpoint, we take a very proactive stance through policy and enforcement of that policy that really helps you be on that proactive front end as opposed to going, whoops, I see a problem here, let's go fix it. You just can't use those devices if they don't match your compliance policy or that written information security policy. So very proactive approach and very much a layered approach that Andrew was mentioning. So multiple components, very easy to manage, but matching your written security policy is the key.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. Thank you both for joining us. Thank you both for your super depth of knowledge that you have in this experience, both Andrew from a practitioner standpoint who has seen the bad side of this, Wes from a technology standpoint who's on the front edge, right, trying to figure out how we prevent this. Again, I don't think we as the media can say this enough. I don't think, Andrew, you said it multiple times just about the awareness, right? This is a problem that is not going away. The WISP is something that everybody has to have. If you're in this profession, you have to have it. And it's just going to be an ugly weekend. You need to sit down and write it out. That template, again, it's got to be customized to your firm, but it will give you the outline between those two documents, give you the outline of what you need to have a good document in place And so with that, again, thank you all for joining us. My apologies for the screen share issues. I'll need to work on my Zoom skills. I don't know if anybody put that in Q&A or not, but if you did, that's very fair. So Andrew and Wes, both, thank you again. I'd love to get you guys back to talk about this further. Maybe we can do some single topic discussions, a little bit shorter, but something that we can get out on a regular basis would be fantastic.
Yeah, I'm up for it.
Love to.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you both.
Thank you both.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks,
Thanks a lot.
everybody.